Let's talk about my first impression of a knife I received today. It is the Spyderco Bradley Air. Stay tuned, guys. We'll talk about it. Hi, gang. Rob here. It is the evening of 13 January 2013, and I got a knife in the mail today. As you guys are probably aware if you pay attention to this channel, I've been on sort of a small, precise gentleman's folder kick lately. Some modern, some traditional. And I've been a big fan of the Spyderco Bradley knife for a couple of years. It's one of those knives in my 7 Knives I'll Never Sell video. Love the construction. I love the execution. I love the steel. Have a lot of respect for the designer. And a year or so ago when the Bradley Air came out, I was interested but not overwhelmed. How do you become overwhelmed with a 1.27 ounce 2.5 inch bladed Spyderco that costs $150 or so? Well, the little Bradley Air waited for me to come around to my small knife phase. And last week, I was watching one of John Davis's videos, Davis Blade Works, and he always buys knives in pairs, and he had a pair of Bradley Airs for sale. I think to fund his new knife making venture. And I thought, what the heck. John handpicked them, and he recommends them, and I know John's a big Gale Bradley fan too, and I thought, what the heck, I'll just buy one. It'll look good in my safe sitting next to my Omnundi. So I did. I bought one, and John picked me the one of the two, which was the most thinly ground. It's nice and thin behind the edge. And I'm kind of getting to know it. And as you gaze upon it, I will go over some specs for you. Let me turn the display back on my phone, and I'll just read them to you. Of course, this is a Taiwan-produced knife for Spyderco. Let's see, there's the laser etch on the blade tang. Taichung, Taiwan. There's the maker's mark. Gale Bradley's Weatherford, Texas logo. On this side we've got the deeply etched Taiwan Spyderco bug, and on this side of the tang we've got Spyderco CPM M4. We've got a Wharncliffe shaped Spidey blade. Looks kind of like a kiwi, doesn't it? It kind of looks like the Gale Bradley folder had some romantic involvement with the kiwi and produced an offspring. We've got that Gale Bradley handle shape. We've got the scales with proud liners, just like the Gale Bradley folder. We've got a liner lock that isn't super accessible. You can see the primary lock release up front where the jimping is, with just a tiny little divot to get your thumb in, and you can do it that way. You certainly can. However, it's a lot easier if you use the whole access relief to deploy the lock or to release the lock. I have to say, and Gale Bradley does like to sort of bury the spider hole. He likes his blades to have sort of a narrow profile in this dimension. So he kind of buries the knife in the handle. From the right side, most of the hole, about 80% of it, is accessible, and the thumb just kind of lies in the hole as it normally would. Super easy deployment. With the left hand, it's a little tougher. You kind of have to dig a little harder for it, but easy to do. Frankly, it is easier to deploy and to, not so much to unlock, but definitely easier to deploy than the Chris Reeve Omnindi. But I digress. We were talking about specs, weren't we? The blade length of this Wharncliffe blade is 2.56 inches, handle 3.39 inches in length for an overall length of only 5.94 inches. I've got some folding knives with handles longer than that. Blade steel, as we read from the blade tang, is CPM M4. A very interesting application, used in both Bradley folders and some Benchmades. Not a knife blade steel, and not heat treated like M4 is usually heat treated for high-speed cutting tools. A very interesting usage and a very interesting way to harden M4. And I'll probably talk about that a little more in the full review after this knife gets a little use on it. The scale material is Spyderco's glass fiber. It's almost translucent. Don't know if you can really pick that up in this light. The liners and the liner lock are 6AL4V titanium with a beautiful satin finish on the edges. The standoffs in this open pillar constructed knife, I believe from Mike's video, Gavco's video, that they are neither steel nor titanium. They're not magnetic, and they did not anodize for him. So we believe they must be nicely polished aluminum, which contributes to the extremely low weight of this knife. And they really go quite well with the titanium. They're polished, and they're hard to tell. It's hard to tell that they're a different material than the liners are. But a little bit less expensive than titanium, and even a little bit lighter. This knife weighs nothing. It's the same weight, if you guys are old YouTube knife guys, the same weight as the SOG Flash 1, 1.2 ounces. Just nothing. As usual, the construction of this knife is almost flawless. You've heard me trumpet the praises of Spyderco's maker in Taichung, and this knife is no exception. It does have that sort of signature peaky, sort of coarse satin blade finish. Interesting how on the blade, the grind lines follow this plunge line. They sort of come back into the knife, and then on the blade tang, they sort of go at this angle. Interesting if you're looking up close, if you can pick that up. It's got a little swedge on the top of that nice Wharncliffe curve, and the swedge grind is absolutely dead even and symmetrical on both sides. The laser etching is perfect. The plunge grinds are exactly the same on both sides. I don't know if you can pick up the symmetry of the stock removal on camera, but it is perfect. Just a super well finished knife as usual, from the Taiwan makers of Spyderco. Blade centering is perfect. Knife is ultra smooth. Detent is perfect. I don't know, how can you screw up a detent on a knife this small, as long as it holds the blade and the handle. The pivot does ride on phosphor bronze washers. Don't know if you can see them, but they are there. There are only 2 flaws I can find in this knife. And one of them isn't, I guess, I don't know. I don't think either one of them are flaws, but as I was really giving it a critical look this afternoon, there were 2 things I noticed. By design, these Gale Bradley Spydercos have the liners proud to the scales, and that is so as you're holding the knife in hand, although there's not a big radius on the handle, it sort of feels like a radius because you're picking up 4 different corners as you go around the spine or around the underside of the knife. So it actually feels round in hand. So you've actually got a reveal as you go around the perimeter of the knife from scale to liner, and that reveal isn't super consistent on both sides of the knife. It gets a little more proud right here on this corner. Don't know if you can see that. And then it sort of tucks back in as you go around that nose of the knife. And then on the butt side, I think you should be able to see this. A lot more reveal on one side of the knife than the other. And when we do the full review and I compare this to some other knives or one other knife that it sort of reminds me of in application, we'll talk about that. And we'll talk about trade-offs in fit and finish for money, for dollar. Not a bad job, and this knife does run about $150. Not cheap for such a tiny little blade. You expect a pretty good level of precision when you're talking about that price point in a 2.5-inch bladed folding knife. Now the other small quality issue, I would call it, comes in the edge grind. Now this is a Wharncliffe. Let's see if I can show this. And as you know, a Wharncliffe should be a perfectly flat blade. And I'm going to try to get this at an angle that you can see it. I'm going to lay the knife so the butt is down. And I think you can see there's some rock. There you go. So what you've got really is a high spot right here, and then the edge slopes up toward the base and a little bit up at the tip. It's actually almost like exactly straight from the tip to about right here. You can really see that peak right there. I don't know that that's an accident or whether it's done on purpose. If it's an accident, it might be a good one, because as this knife is sharpened, most of the use is going to come in this area. You shouldn't really use a Wharncliffe digging with the tip all the time, because you're going to severely shorten its life. But I think as this knife sharpens over the years, this sort of curve, this little tiny bit of belly, will probably sharpen out. In fact, I'm probably going to try to sharpen most of it out the first time. Look at this nice little detail, though. Look at the base of that edge. For such a tiny knife, we've got so much room to sharpen the base of that blade, which is so important on a Wharncliffe, because you really want to be able to lay a perfectly straight edge on that thing. And if you're having to tip your stone to dig into a plunge grind right here, it makes that awfully difficult. So good job, Spyderco. Pretty neat little knife. The most impressive thing about it, and especially impressive since I'm going to use it wrong-handedly, I'm left-handed of course, I can get to that hole easily with my left thumb. I can disengage the lock, close it with one hand, no problem. Right-handed, it's even slicker yet. Most knives this small are not this slick to use one-handed. Pretty impressive. Actually, if you practice a little, you can flick it open, just like a real Spyderco. How about that? Very impressive, dressy little knife. Even got a little chamfer on this On this liner where you access the hole, you can see it sort of glinting in the light. Not so, of course, for me, the lefty. Let's look at the lockup. Just a little more than 50%. You can see that liner fully engaged into the blade tang. That's where you want it. This isn't going to be a hard use knife. I don't expect a lot of lock wear, and it's set up to be real sturdy right off the bat. Now when I took this out of the box, it was a free dropping blade. I did tighten the pivot just a little bit for centering. It was favoring the side away from the lock just a little, so I put just the slightest bit of extra tension on it, and it's still very smooth. And I haven't taken it apart and touched it inside, so I'm pretty happy with that. I don't know if it's sharp though. I haven't cut anything with this knife. Got it out of the mail about 11:30 this morning. And I know John had not sharpened it. Let's see if they'll cut the standard media of the Apostle P channel, the Natchez Shooter Supply catalog paper. Hey, that's pretty smoking for a factory edge. A little rough spot right in that sort of high spot, as a matter of fact, that I was pointing out earlier. Not perfect. It'll be better when I get done with it, huh? If I get out there toward the tip, it's a little better. As you guys know, the CPM M4 makes you work for it, but takes a phenomenal edge. I can't wait to get a little use on this knife, get my edge on it, put it through its paces, and come bring you a full review. And there's not a lot of video on this knife on YouTube. You got Gavco's knife, which has been passed on to Cliff Stamp and a couple other guys. But I think there are only 4 or 5 videos, maybe 6 on all of YouTube. And this knife's been out for a year, so it must not be getting much love. I don't know if I'm going to end up loving it or not, but we're going to find out. Thought you'd like to see it. Have a great night, guys. Grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ.